in executive search, we had this term, it's called the purple squirrel. And so the idea is when you overspecify on all of your requirements, the perfect candidate becomes as rare as a purple squirrel. But a lot of the times you actually don't need one. A lot of the times, a good old brown squirrel is all you need.
Welcome back to Fintech Layer Cake. On today's episode, a chat with Shirley Zhang, a recruiter at Lithic who went from a 19-year-old intern to placing VP-level executives.
We had employees starting their first day without a seat, without a laptop. We were so unprepared because just nobody owned it. I'm seeing people come in on their first day and they're like, what kind of place did I just join? They don't have anything for me. And so that's not a great experience, right? Because when people go home to their families, nobody asks like, oh, how's your third day at work? They go, how's your first day at work? And that's how I built out the onboarding process.
What would the top 3 pieces of advice you give them as they're starting to embark on this? Like, how do we hire our first employee?
I tell them to anchor on a few traits. And the first would be intellectual curiosity. The people who are always asking why, they're the ones who are going to compound over time. Another would be to look for work ethic. When you're at 0 to 1, it's a really rough stage to be at. And then I would say the third thing to look for is dedication. These folks are really laying the foundation for the whole company.
What do you think are some of the more common recruiting mistakes that folks make when hiring?
I have a bit of a strong opinion on this, and it's a really big one for me is
Welcome back to Fintech Layer Cake, where we uncover secret recipes and practical insights from fintech leaders and experts. I'm your host, Reggie Young, Chief of Staff at Lithic. On today's episode, I'm excited to chat with Shirley Zhang. Shirley's actually a colleague of mine at Lithic and a rockstar recruiter who's worked at fintechs going from 0 to 1, as well as exec recruiting firms. We did a brief interview with her at Lithic's retreat last year, and she was so full of recruiting wisdom that I immediately wanted to get her on the podcast. Shirley gives a crash course in hiring. What do you look for when you hire your first employee? How do you even hire for culture fit? How do you build people operations from 0 to 1? And why should we all keep an eye out for purple squirrels? We cover all of this and more. Fintech Layer Cake is powered by the Kardashian platform Lithic. We provide financial infrastructure that enables teams to build better payments products for consumers and businesses. Nothing in this podcast should be construed as legal or financial advice. If you enjoyed Fintech Layer Cake, please give it a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Shirley, welcome to the podcast. Excited to chat today. Great place to start is maybe giving folks a 30-second spiel on your background. Why am I even talking to you today?
Thanks for inviting me on the podcast, Reggie. I think the most obvious answer is that you invited me here to give you kind of a spiel on myself to everyone. So I actually started my career as an early employee at one of our customers, a startup called Order. And there I was employee number 7, and I actually joined at the pre-seed stage as an intern when I was just 19 years old and ended up building both the people ops and recruiting functions there from scratch. After that, I went into executive search, and there's a bit of a hierarchy in the world of recruiting firms here, and executive recruiters are right at the very top. So I was really fortunate to be trained and trusted to hire executives in VP level roles and above across portfolios of really great VC, PE firms, and even some publicly traded companies. And now here at Lithic, I get to combine both of those backgrounds, which has led me to provide this sort of white glove service to hiring managers and candidates. I like to take a more strategic, consultative approach to it. So when a role isn't progressing well, I try to figure out what went wrong, how can we improve? Are we fishing in the wrong pond? Can we use better bait? And for the candidate, I'm not just selling them on Lithic being the best place to work, although I do genuinely believe it is, but I am also trying to be their guide and make sure they've got everything they need to feel confident on what is really a huge life decision. And so in a nutshell, I'm really just trying to be a good matchmaker here.
I love it. +1 to Lithic, being the best place to work. We'll try not to plug Lithic too much in the podcast, but I think one of the things I'd love to cover with you is, you saw the sort of very early stage at Order. And I'm thinking about maybe like a scrappy seed stage startup founder or operator who's making, one of the very first early hires. They have no resources for a recruiter. They don't really know anything about hiring because they focus on the tech and the payments aspect, and they have no idea how to hire. Like, what would the top 3 pieces of advice you give them be as they're starting to embark on this? Like, how do we hire our first employee?
When you're at that stage and it's just the founders making their first hire, you don't really have a process yet. And that's okay because that's normal at that stage. In a way, you are also the process. And so I think in terms of what to look for, because I think your first hires are really your key hires, I tell them to anchor on a few traits. And the first would be intellectual curiosity, because your early hires shape absolutely everything. And the people who are always asking why, people who genuinely want to figure things out, they're the ones who are going to compound over time. And so that's a trait that I tell them to look for. Another would be to look for work ethic. When you're at 0 to 1, it's a really rough stage to be at. There are going to be late nights. You're going to have to hop on at odd hours. Something could go wrong, and there's really no playbook here, and there's no backup. And so you need someone who is going to be willing to roll up their sleeves and do the hard, nitty-gritty work that isn't really glamorous on a day-to-day. And then I would say the third thing to look for is dedication. These folks are really laying the foundation for the whole company. And so you need people who are genuinely bought in and not just available in the market. Because that's the reality of a job and how things work. Some people are just looking to work a job, and that's not kind of what you need at this stage. You need someone who can really, again, have that real work ethic, have that intellectual curiosity, and be able to handle the grind. Because at those early days, that's really what a lot of it is. Not everything is optimized, and you have to be really scrappy, and you have to be available and just brought into the mission. And I'm not saying you have to work there for like the next 20 years of your life, but it's a very unique experience, and not everyone in the world wants that. And so having people who do want that experience is important here. And if I could sneak in one more thing, I'd say to treat every single candidate well, even if you have no process at all, because you are the company's first impression. Word in this world travels faster than you think. Especially if it's bad news. So you probably don't want that when you're just starting out.
Yeah, the recruiting process is a great opportunity to bring joy to potential candidates who hopefully become employees. So with any industry like fintech, it becomes a small world the more you're in it, and so great to leave folks with good impressions. Any other top lessons from what works or doesn't in the 0 to 1 phase of building out a people ops function at a startup?
Oh, this one's going to be kind of long for me because it definitely dives into my past a lot. So I think for me, it just simply came with doing what needs to be done. And so when I was at Order, and this was before I ever dived into people ops, we had employees starting their first day without a seat, without a laptop, and we were so unprepared because just nobody owned it. And for me, this is a company I've been working at for a while now, and I love it here. And so I'm seeing people come in on their first day, and they're like, kind of like, what kind of place did I just join? They don't have anything for me. And so that's not a great experience, right? Because, when people go home to their families, nobody asks like, oh, how's your third day at work? They go, how's your first day at work? Like, you want to set a good first impression. Or they ask, how was your first week at work? No one's asking, oh, how's your second month at work? And so, there wasn't really an onboarding experience. And that was something I felt like we needed. And I was really lucky to have been given that project to take on. And so I just researched online, borrowed what I liked from other companies, and that's how I built out the onboarding process at Order. And really, my progression into people ops started from there. And so when it came to recruiting, I had already become the go-to person for people ops, but I didn't necessarily own it yet, right? And so there was this point in time where I was just onboarding this whole wave of people, and then offboarding folks very soon after, right? And because of that, I was also constantly wiping, setting up laptops, and that was really time consuming for me. And I did this manually, by the way. I didn't have anyone else helping me out with this. And so I was physically wiping everything. And this was a very clear signal to me in my day-to-day that something was a bit broken there in terms of the way we recruited. And so I kind of took the same approach that I did the first time. And so I did my research. I met with everyone who had done hiring because at this point, it wasn't completely zero yet. There was something, but it just wasn't very much. And so I just wanted to kind of get some data on like, what are we doing that works at the moment and what are we doing that doesn't work? And so after I did that and did some more research, I decided to dive in and build out the foundational recruiting function there. I think process improvement has kind of been my jam. I really love optimizing and finding better ways to do things. Now, does that mean I'm building the best of the best right then and there? No. But I'm building what, works at this point in time for the stage that we're at. And you'll iterate again as you build your company, but it's important to recognize, what do you need at this point in time and really being able to optimize for that, because when you try to build something that's too perfect, it can sometimes take too long and it also might just not be what you need at that point in time. So, I think what works here is really taking action and not waiting around for some perfect system to exist before you put any structure at all, but there should be an owner for everything. And there are times where we can all help each other out, of course, but at some point as you grow, you need a dedicated person that folks can just go to for everything that you need. So at Order, people came to me for all sorts of things, whether that's checking whether a client has sent in their check or needing their G Suite password reset, any questions on benefits, where the heck the forks are in the office, even though I did label them. And I was a catch-all for everything that didn't really have a need yet for a single dedicated employee, and that worked at that stage. But for me, I was really young at the time, and I think it provided me the unique opportunity and the chance to kind of taste so many different responsibilities of the people ops team and people ops adjacent spaces. And that's kind of my 2 cents there.
I love it. As we talk about Lithic all the time, iterate. You got to start somewhere and then just build on it rather than waiting for perfect. So
always got to iterate, and I'm constantly doing that here.
What do you think are some of the more common recruiting mistakes that folks make when hiring?
So there are a few here, and I think I have a bit of a strong opinion on this. So if it's a little too long, just let me know. I think the first one, and it's a really big one for me, is not giving people a really good candidate experience. And I think driving a really great candidate experience is one of the most important aspects of recruiting to me, if not the most important, because we are all candidates at some point in our lives. And if we can't treat someone with the respect that they deserve, how can we ever expect them to want to work here with us? And so I think one of the things that gets a really bad rap in the recruiting space is ghosting. And the sad part is that this has become the experience that candidates all over the world have come to think is just normal. And so for me, it goes back to a lesson we've all learned in elementary school. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Nobody's perfect, of course, and sometimes someone slips through the crack, and that's probably because I opened your email on the way to the subway or in between meetings. But for the most part, I really try my best to get back to everyone, especially if they follow up. And so, another thing I do is I think a lot about how stressful interviewing is. And even though I conduct them all day long, I get really stressed out being interviewed. So, even for a complete superstar candidate, I'm sure they've got some nerves here. And so what I like to do is I try to make people feel as comfortable as I possibly can in my conversations, and less of like a, hey, this is a conversation and I'm gonna do like a gotcha moment here. And I want them to walk away knowing they have someone that they can count on, someone that is rooting for them. And I really just try to be the recruiter that to other people that I would have wanted for myself. And sometimes, Lithic just isn't the right path for someone, and that's okay. But if someone decides that this isn't the right place for them, I want them to have all the information that they need to say no to us in full confidence. I don't want anyone to ever head off in a different direction based on an assumption. So if there's, answers that you need to make your decision, like ask away. I will go ahead and get them for you if I don't have them myself. Because I think, finding a new job, it's a stressful experience. I mean, who's ever said, hey, I'm looking for a new job and I love doing this. It's
Yep.
like, who says that? And so I think just making it as easy as you can for a candidate is a lot. And everyone loves to talk about how hard it is to make a judgment call on someone in a half-hour conversation. And I do think that's true. That's hard even for me too. But the reverse is also just as true. How is someone supposed to decide whether they want to spend the next few years of their day-to-day with us while also worrying about showcasing their very best self in an interview. Like, I think that's even harder, right? And, just because someone isn't right for a role right now doesn't mean they aren't right forever. And, we grow as a company, candidates grow in their career. I don't think I would have been right for Lithic 5 years ago either. And at the end of the day, not everyone remembers exactly what you said to them, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And I think that's a huge takeaway and where you can really make a difference. That was a big kind of like first mistake here. And so the second mistake I would say, and this is also a big one for me, is not working as a team.
Hmm.
And so my favorite client ever from my executive recruiting career is Lance Sapera. At the time, he was the VP of Talent Acquisition at a company called Talent. And Lance had this really great line that he always signed off with, and it is, recruiting is a team sport. And so you've probably seen me say it here because I borrow it from Lance. And it's one I'll never forget. It's one of the biggest reasons why I actually love recruiting here at Lithic, especially because here everyone dives in. And I wouldn't have the chance to drive the kind of impact I've had if it weren't for all the folks involved. And so I say recruiting is a team sport, and I'm not a sports person here, so you'll have to forgive me. My analogy is terrible. But let's say I'm the coach and all the interviewers are the players and the candidates the ball. And so if anyone were to quite literally drop the ball here, the whole thing just wouldn't work. And what makes our team so special is, I don't have to worry about that. And so when I find someone who's a really great fit, I already know that I have a team I can depend on to deliver a fantastic experience, and I'll pick it right back up on the finish, right? So I never have to ping an interviewer in advance and say, hey, please make sure to be nice to them, or please don't forget to do this, don't forget to do that. And that's because I can trust people here, and having that strong team is really important. And so, I hear it from candidates over and over again, especially the ones who don't decide to move forward. And they'll say, hey, I got another offer. I'm going to withdraw, but please thank everyone for their time. I really enjoyed meeting the team. And, that's something that is special. Someone taking the time to thank us for our time, even though they went a different direction. And so having a team I can depend on like that just makes my job so much easier. I've also had candidates tell me hey, I really love the team so much. You guys made my decision so hard, but I'm going to go in a different direction. And sometimes it's sad. I wish those people would have been here at Lithic with us, but I genuinely just think that there's a job out there for everyone. And, it's sometimes not here, and that's okay, right? That's also part of my role. My role isn't just to be a recruiter for Lithic. It's, I am a service to the candidate, whether they decide to work here or not. And so I'll add in one more thing here. And so I think the last thing I'll talk about here is having a huge list of requirements for a role and not budging. And so in executive search, we had this term that's called the purple squirrel. And so when I heard it for the first time, I actually thought one of the partners I was working with completely made it up. But it's actually a real term, so you can look it up on Google if you like. And so the idea is when you overspecify on all of your requirements, the perfect candidate becomes as rare as a purple squirrel. And so you can think of it as like the recruiting cousin of the unicorn here. And so sometimes you get moments where someone looks like a purple squirrel on paper, and then you talk to them and you realize they're not. But I think the thing is, a lot of the times you actually don't need one. A lot of the times, a good old brown squirrel is all you need. And you know what? Sometimes it's a chipmunk. Sometimes the chipmunk can get the job done just as well as the squirrel. And so having an open mindset about how to be creative and narrowing down what you absolutely cannot give up on and what you can flex on will really open up your options, because hitting the bullseye is great. Who doesn't love that? I love winning. But if the bullseye is way too hard to get, and your hunt for that purple squirrel is just taking ages, your team is going to suffer. And that causes burnout. Folks become unhappy. People leave. And then you've got more roles to fill. And then your whole company morale suffers for it. So I would say don't go just trying to hunt for purple squirrels. It's a recipe for disaster, and it's not going to play out well in the long run.
I love it. So I've been like mentally tracking and summarizing these lessons. It's like, yeah, golden rule: treat everybody as you want to be treated. But the second point kind of being like that is true for every single person on an interview panel. Like I feel like at some companies, folks get asked to be on an interview panel and don't take it seriously. It's like, oh, sure, this is a favor to my coworker. They don't take seriously that like the person that is like such an important, critical role that they need to take seriously. And then the last lesson: don't hyper optimize for a purple squirrel because you're going to be getting in your own way if you do that.
It's called a purple squirrel for a reason.
Yep. So one of the interesting or like more fascinating aspects of hiring to me is that you can look at objective information, you can look at somebody's like resume and see where they worked, but there's also a lot of sort of gut feel components to it. So how do you balance that need for like objectivity? Like we don't want to introduce too much bias, but we also need to listen to our gut and like feel the vibe of the candidate a little bit. How do you balance those two?
So in executive recruiting, I was taught that recruiting is both an art and a science. And so the science part is easy, actually, or at least the part it's easy to me. It's about doing all the right research, asking the right questions to get the responses you need so you can collect all the data points you need to make a firm decision about whether or not you want to move forward with someone. And some of the art is controlling the conversation. So making sure that the candidate feels relaxed enough to share what you're looking for. And I think that's actually like where people like tend to fall short. You know, the conversation shouldn't be a stagnant question, answer, back and forth. Being personable, isn't just like a nice thing to do. It's actually how you get the real data and how the candidate can also have a really great experience, even if they don't end up being the hire. And so when I'm on a phone screen, there's actually so much going on for me that I guess most people aren't thinking about. So, I'm selling the role. I'm also fact checking. I'm also trying to be a pleasant person to talk to. I'm making an assessment. And then on top of all that, I'm trying to take as many accurate notes as fast as I can on all the great things that I'm hearing. And so, because we're doing so many things at once, I do think a lot of recruiters tend to come in a few different flavors here, right? And it's because it's really hard to be great at all of those things at once. And so some folks are really wonderful at selling, and I think very highly of them, especially in executive search, because sometimes you have just 15 minutes to convince a busy executive that you cold called that it's even worth their time to consider turning their whole life around to go work for your client instead. And so, when you have that sales style recruiter that finds the right person, they're the ones you can count on to really bring it home for you. They're going to be the ones that's going to really turn it around. And that's an area where I think I can always get better. But luckily here at Lithic, it's quite easy to sell because I love working here and I love sharing that joy with others. I think because I came up through people ops, though, I lean more towards the assessment side of things. And so, I really focus on the science and the art definitely does come up for me, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But I really want to bring in great people that the team will genuinely enjoy working with. And because I think it's terrible to bring in someone who isn't right and then create more headaches than value for everyone else around me. And beyond that, I just love the challenge of it. It's a matchmaking game for me. I love the research and I love finding that person that I know is just right. And so I promise I'm getting somewhere here. So to your actual question on the gut feel piece here. So like I said, recruiting is really both an art and a science. There is all this research. There's all these concrete data points you can put together. And then there's this part that is almost unexplainable. And I describe it as sixth sense. And I've developed it over time. And it doesn't happen with every hire, but there are times when I'm on the phone, and maybe only 10 minutes into the call, I haven't even asked a single assessment question yet. And I just know. I know as soon as I get off this call, regardless of what they say to me, unless it's something crazy, that my scorecard is going to read strong yes. Now, I don't put all my eggs in one basket like that because, geez, it would be really bad if I were wrong here. But so far, every time that I've had that feeling about someone, it's just turned out to be right. And I'll admit, I get personally invested. I end up secretly rooting for them through every stage of the process. It's a little bit insane how many times I type their name into the search bar just to check in on them. And nobody knows this because I don't tell them about it. And so, yeah, the other part of the art is just that gut feel, and art's up to interpretation, right? And so, it goes both ways. Sometimes I'll hop on the phone. Someone's giving me all the right data points that I need, but just something feels off. It feels like they're not telling the truth. And luckily I've had a scenario where, I had this feeling and I actually knew someone at that company on that team, and I was actually able to verify that weird gut feeling that I have. And so, what I'll say here on the gut feeling part is your gut is usually right. You're reacting that way for a reason. You may not consciously be aware of it, but there's a reason behind why you're reacting that way. But always take it with a grain of salt and, consider your data points too, because that's probably also what's contributing to your gut reaction. And if you're not sure, just soundboard with someone, right? Don't spiral in your head alone about it. Just talk it out, and you might have some more clarity there. So it's really a balance. Still a bit of a mystery to me, and yeah, I do get those feelings all the time.
I've been talking to folks a lot lately about the idea that being an operator at a startup is sort of it's a Zen art. It's both an art and a science, and you need to like both look at the metrics, but also like trust your intuition and like develop that sort of like taste and judgment. Both pieces are critical, so that makes a ton of sense. You spent time executive recruiting. In addition to the 0 to 1 phase of your career, you've also spent time kind of at that like sort of senior exec level, which it's just like a fascinating set of unique problems compared to like general hiring. How does a company figure out if a person is a fit for a leadership team, or I guess even more generally for the company's culture? That's like culture is such a like crazy hard problem to me. Like how do you figure that out?
It's a tough problem to solve. And that's why executive search firms like the ones I worked at exist, right? And that's why you also have to pay a hefty price for some of them, because it is tough and it's time consuming. And so I could talk for hours about this. So I'll kind of put something that I think is really important here, especially at a startup. So I think the trick for me is that you need to put some real structure to it, right? So you have to figure out, okay, again, what do I need? And don't go for the purple squirrel. The purple squirrel's nice, but don't go for the purple squirrel here. And so figure out, what you need this person to do, what kind of backgrounds work. But I think what's really important here is getting that kind of company culture correctly, right? And so you should have questions that are created and tied to your core values so that culture fit becomes something that's a little bit easier for you to assess rather than just a gut reaction in the room, right? So again, it's that balance of the art and the science. You have the art, it's that vibe check, as people would call it, but you're missing the data points. And so you need those questions to give you those data points. And so for me, it's not like, oh, I hop on a call and, do I want to grab a drink with this person? I mean, most of the time I like people. So most of the time the answer is yes, right? But I think what I'm really trying to figure out on the call is this person going to raise the bar and work really well with how the team actually operates? And it matters so much because we spend the majority of our lives at work.
Yep.
It's true. We spend more time with our colleagues than we do with our own family and
Yep.
friends, which sounds a little sad, but if you enjoy the people you're working with, then it's less sad there. And so the people you end up working alongside are a huge deal. And I think that's why, it matters so much to so many candidates who are deciding on their next role, right? And so when you're making that leadership hire, it goes back to a lot of things I've tried out. Providing that really great candidate experience. As much as you're trying to figure out whether they're a good fit here, they're also trying to figure out if they're a good fit with you. And so I think keeping that open mind that, interviewing goes both ways. And yes, our evaluation of the candidate, is really important here, but it's also their window into what it's like working with us. And sometimes the questions you ask can actually impress people. Some people will say to me like, wow, that's like a really great question. And they'll really take the time to think about it. But one thing I like to come back to here actually is another line. It's called people by people first. And I actually picked that up outside of my recruiting people tech career. I picked this up when I was in college before I started working at Order. When I was just working at retail, not too far from here, at a little store called Costs here in Soho. And so I was working customer service, and a training they gave me was called "You Are the Difference" by Alf Dunbar. And so the whole concept here is people buy people first. And that's really stuck with me since, because I do think that's true, right? First impressions do matter, and that's kind of everything here. But, who wants to work a job where they feel miserable around other people, no matter how much you're getting paid? That really deteriorates your life a lot. And so I think that's really important when it comes to figuring out the leadership hire, because that person is a force multiplier. They're making decisions that's going to impact everyone else. And so getting that culture fit correct is really important here. So go with your gut, but also make sure you have what you need to collect your data points and balance that together. That's kind of like the early pieces of it, but definitely get all your feedback, listen to what everyone's saying. If there are concerns, really pick that apart. Because for a leadership hire, that's really important. Dive into it. Don't just dismiss it. Because sometimes something that comes up once, it comes up like 10 times later when you start working with them. So you want to make sure that's not a one-time scenario.
I love the formulation of will they raise our bar? Like, will they embody our values more in practice? I think is like a really good articulation of like what a culture fit looks like in practice. For our wrap-up question, would love to hear what drew you to recruiting in the first place.
It'd be normal to have this as a straightforward answer. The reality is that I just fell into it. And I've asked this question to other recruiters as well. And so most people do fall into it. I've only ever met one person who said they, really wanted to be a recruiter. And that's because their mother was a recruiter. So I think that's a good reason here. But going back to myself here, I was actually never really drawn to recruiting. In fact, it was the one area of the people space that I really didn't want to go into. I thought it was frightening. The idea of talking on the phone to someone I've never met and then making a judgment call on them was really scary to me. And so for a while, I actually resisted it. And so when you think about it, you grow the most from doing difficult things, right? And so I cared more about what was going on at Order than I did about myself. And that's why I dived into it, because I cared a lot. And so I was like, I'm just going to do the hard thing here. And so I knew something in me had changed, because I went from calling someone and, the phone's ringing and I'm like just secretly praying to myself, like, oh, please don't pick up, please don't pick up. And then now, like, things are totally different. Like, there was that shift that went from I stopped having that please don't pick up feeling to, oh, they didn't pick up, and being just really disappointed that I didn't get to talk to them. And that's when I knew things had really changed for me. And, what really gave me my start, like I said, was that it just needed to be done. And so at Order, I was wearing so many hats. There was this very clear signal that something was broken in how we hired. And so I dived into it because process improvement is my jam. And then when I was figuring out my next step, I got some really good career advice. And I'd share this advice to anyone who's looking for their next opportunity here. It was take the opportunity that's both exciting and scary. And so I had a bunch of startup options, all within my comfort zone. And then there was executive search, which was something I had never even heard of and had to Google what it was after my first call. And so easily, it was the scariest one on my list here. And that's how I knew it was the one. And I actually ended up crying in the shower that day when I got the offer, because that's when leaving Order became really real to me. It was a place that I had grown. It's a place that I had watched grow from under 10 people to over 60, a place where I had made so many friends, so many memories, and a place that had watched me grow up too. And, I'd spent over 4 years of my life there. They trusted a kid in college with so much. And so, I think my first startup will always hold a really special place in my heart. And, leaving was one of the hardest things that I'd ever had to do. But if I never had, I wouldn't have gotten the executive search training that I got from the very best of the best. And I wouldn't be the recruiter that I am today. And, I wouldn't have been able to learn from such great leaders in the recruiting space. One partner in particular who, really invested a lot in me, his name's Anthony Cenzano. If you ever talk to him, pick up the phone because he's fantastic. And, he's just so smart. But, I wouldn't have been able to meet him. He's made such a huge impact on my career, and I never made that journey. I probably would have never made that journey from going, dear God, I don't want to do this, to genuinely loving it and having it become part of my day to day. And, some days here at Lithic, like, I don't have a single phone screen on my calendar. And if that happens for a few days, like, it's a little weird. I was like, I kind of want to go talk to somebody. um, and so, recruiting has honestly become just really core to who I am, even outside of Lithic. I think it's really nice that I work in a function where I can be helpful to friends and family. And, I'm fortunate to really develop a skill set that's, really helpful to people outside of work too. And I think just it's really become who I am. And it's kind of weird to think about that, I was really resistant to it once upon a time.
I love it. As I like to say, company is just it's people, right? At the end of the day, it's a company is only a group of people. I'm not only it is its people. People's are one of the highest leverage things you can do, and of course, recruiting is a core aspect of that. So I hope listeners found this as practically educational as and insightful as I did. So thanks, Shirley, so much for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Reggie. And if I shoot you a message on LinkedIn, please answer.